My name is Cecilia, and welcome back to the Chargers Check-In, coming at you after a tough loss against the New York Giants and Jackson Dart in his starting debut. This was a tough one. The number one question that you always ask after a game is, did the winners win or did the losers lose? You always want the winners to win, right? If your team wins, you want it to be because you're good. If your team loses, you want it to be because they're good. But unfortunately, the reality is, the Chargers lost this more than the Giants won. And Giants fans maybe have some disagreements with that, but I think a lot of them were so afraid that Jackson Dart would be really bad that when it turned out he was kind of fine, that's really good news. And I think it is. I think Jackson Dart will be good. But starting on why the Chargers lost this. The number one thing that's going to jump out to fans is penalties. Penalties aren't usually a huge issue on Harbaugh teams because on well-coached teams, it shouldn't happen. They had 14 for 107 yards, which is almost as many yards as Jackson Dart had passing. Clearly, the Chargers lost this, at least to me. I think a notable thing is with all of the injuries on the offensive line, a lot of those second string players made a lot of these penalties. I mean, Jamari Sawyer had a couple. I believe it was the guy who came in for Joe Alt, Austin Deculus, a name I'm sure most of you don't know, for good reason. They had some penalties, and you had some by starters too. It wasn't all on offense, but I can't help but think if we didn't have these injuries, we wouldn't have these players out there, and then this wouldn't have happened. But at the end of the day, your backups have to be ready to step in and play. They're never going to play at the same level, and that's not on the coaching staff. But coming in and not being ready to not commit penalties, that's something that we can put on Harbaugh and his staff. It's not just the penalties, it's also the offensive play calling. Now, I didn't love the play calling on defense, but again, 111 yards in the passing game is good enough. I wish they had more of a QB spy situation on Jackson Dart. That is what I thought that they would do because it worked well against Mahomes, and Jackson Dart is not as good as Mahomes, breaking news. So I'm not sure why they didn't just put Henley on Jackson Dart a bit more, because Jackson Dart looked good once he got out of the pocket. It was hard for him to get out of the pocket, and I think that would have given Henley a lot of time to get some tackles for loss, but that is not what they did, which is unfortunate. Also on offense, there were some dropped passes that would have made a big difference. In that first drive, Ladd McConkey dropped a pass. He dropped a couple throughout the day. That would have made a big difference. That could have given him a spark on a drive. I think Ladd McConkey's one of those players. You really need to get him in a rhythm. You need to get him going. So it's unfortunate that they couldn't do that today, but not something I think Chargers fans need to obsess on. Ladd is good. When everyone else was dropping passes last year, he was the one that Herbert could depend on, so I don't think we need to be worried about him. If he's still like this in a few games, maybe we could have a conversation. But for now, the biggest takeaway from this game is the bad thing happened, but the worst thing didn't. Justin Herbert got hit over and over and over again, like we were afraid he might, but ultimately he came away uninjured, which is really good news on this very injured offensive side. Now, the injuries on the offensive line are crazy. They're not the regime's fault. I think even if they had drafted a couple good offensive linemen, we still would be having these injury problems because now that starting tackle duo are both hurt. Now, the good news is, I know we all panicked when Joe Alt was carted off the field. That's never what you want to see. It seems likely that it's a high ankle sprain. That's what Justin Herbert had at the beginning of last year, I believe. And that's usually a few weeks. I think we might be able to see him go on the IR and then come back after 4. It's possible that they don't put him on the IR. We will see, but this isn't something you want to linger. And so, you definitely don't want to be dealing with this heading into the postseason. So I would not be surprised if he's out for 5 to 6 weeks, which is very unfortunate because he is the best player on that line. Arguably, even if Rashawn Slater were there, he might be the best player on that line. So yeah, Justin Herbert survived. Thank God. He got beat up. The broadcast kept making a point of, man, these quarterbacks are both taking a beating. Justin Herbert was doing what he could to not take a beating. Jackson Dart seemed to be going out of his way to take a beating, which didn't make much sense. But we'll get into his performance in a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the scheme and how it played out, and then I want to get into some key matchups that we talked about going into this game. So first of all, the scheme. On defense, like I said, the main thing was I think they could have locked down Jackson Dart a bit better. Ultimately, the defensive line performed really well. They had some great run stops, pretty consistently shutting down Cam Scatterbo. They held him to 3 yards a carry. That's pretty good considering the momentum he had going into this week. And he looks really good. Giants fans should be happy, but the defensive line did pretty good shutting him down. I'm glad Deshaun Hand was out there. He did get that stupid penalty on him that personal foul for absolutely no reason, which again, you can kind of put on coaching. The defensive line has had a bit of a personal foul problem. I thought it was just a T.R. Tart problem. Luckily, he hasn't been called every time, but hopefully that's something that they can put a lid on, because 107 yards in penalties is really embarrassing. And if it were just that, I would say, oh, the Giants still won. You know, it wasn't that the Chargers lost, because the Broncos got a lot of penalties, but I still think that was mostly a good Chargers performance. But in this case, 107 yards, backup O-lineman not knowing how to work together, and offensive play calling wasn't good. So let's get into the offensive play calling side. So our goal going into this game was keep Herbert alive while scoring points. Passing game has been incredibly effective this year, and so naturally they wanted to go with the passing game. It's hard to do that when you have less than 2.5 seconds to throw the ball. And in the second quarter, I think they made a good adjustment, did a lot of those quick passes, they had a few screens, they got the quick game going, that worked out really well. But then, of course, the defense adjusted, because that's what they need to do. And I thought the adjustment that the Chargers could make was going to be the run game. Give it to Hampton. Hampton had a crazy good game. He had 12 carries for 128 yards. He also had 37 yards receiving. I don't know why the ball wasn't in his hands more. As much as I am like, yeah, Herbert can probably be the hero. Most of the time he is. And this time he didn't. I'm also like, well, if there's someone else on the offense who can carry the team, can we preserve Herbert? We're really lucky that he didn't get hurt. He only took 2 sacks, but it seemed like every pass that he had that was beyond that first level, he got a huge hit at the end of it. Every pass came at such a huge price that it didn't feel worth it to me. Because it's not like we were making huge gains most of the time. Now, he did have that pass to Quentin Johnston. That looked excellent. It's amazing what happens when he does have a few seconds back there. But Amari and Hampton looked way too good for them not to run the ball over and over again. Even if he got stopped a few times, just them having to respect the run more might have gotten that line to hesitate a little bit, because Burns got home once, Thibodeau got home once. Abdul Carter didn't get a sack, but he still made a big impact. He got some pressures, got some tackles for loss, I believe, and was able to kind of tee off in the run game, because it wasn't happening often enough, in my opinion. I'm curious what you guys think about what Greg Roman's mentality was going into this. I understand it's like, you know, Justin Herbert's doing really well, he's really hot, but we need to protect him, and this wasn't the game to put Herbert out on a limb for. Hampton had a big opportunity here. We know that the Giants' secondary and their linebackers aren't a great group. Their front is the great group, and the way that you stop a great pass rush, if not with a great offensive line, which they didn't have, is to run the ball, run it right at them. Even if it doesn't work every time, it can slow them down. Burns just has such a crazy get-off at times, not as consistently as like your Nick Bonitos, but he's had such a great year that I don't understand giving this defensive line so many opportunities, but we'll get into that. Now, it wasn't all bad. I liked their second point try play call. I liked that they just had Herbert run it themselves. The Giants didn't look like they expected that. And anything we can do to get Herbert more comfortable using his legs is a good thing. Herbert only had 1 run in this game, a very effective run, but I would like to see a bit more. But it's hard to run when you can't get out of the pocket. So is what it is. That being said, we're going to go over the results of the key matchups that we had going into this game, as well as some positive takeaways. I know it feels very negative for the Bolt fam right now, but there are definitely some positives. Some players really popped off in this game. And there are some reasons for hope. So the first key matchup that we talked about going into this game was Jackson Dart versus this Chargers secondary. Chargers have a pretty good secondary, also have a decent front. They are kind of balanced in that way, although their front skews a little bit more toward run defense, in my opinion. I thought Jackson Dart played fine. He went 13 for 20 with 111 yards. But the secondary didn't do great. I would have loved to see some more pass breakups. I thought Jackson Dart played pretty safe. It didn't feel like he was pushing himself too much. And I'm going to call this kind of a wash. Neither side played great. Neither side, did anything too noteworthy. I think when Elijah Molden comes back, we're going to see more opportunities for interceptions. Normally this defense is pretty good at that. Right now the Chargers are down on the turnover differential for the season, which isn't good. And while Herbert has had as many turnovers this season as he had all of last season, which is concerning, I have a hard time being mad at Herbert for that when this offensive line isn't performing for him and his receivers are dropping balls. So, but yeah, in terms of Jackson Dart, I thought, Giants fans should be reasonably happy with what they saw. He didn't look like a star out there. He wasn't CJ Stroud his rookie year, but at the same time, the mistakes that he was making felt like rookie mistakes. And that's a good thing. You don't want him making general mistakes that you're like, how are we going to coach him out of this? Rookie mistakes should be fixed over time. For example, he seemed really out of step with his receivers. He missed a few throws to Theo Johnson. I mean, he missed throws to seemingly every receiver because according to Patricia from the Locked On Giants podcast, he hasn't been getting first team reps at all. It's been all Russell Wilson, and that surprises me. Besides the fact that Russell Wilson did poorly right away and they maybe wanted to work Dart in earlier in the season, at least at practice, it also just seems unwise to have a backup quarterback that you're looking at as the future of your franchise not start getting a rapport with the guys that are going to be there in future years. So that to me is just poor managing on Daboll's part. We will see, but again, this is what happens when you let a coach who's holding on to his job for dear life pick a quarterback. I mean, look at Caleb Williams. Look how much better he looks under Ben Johnson already. I'm not saying he looks amazing, but man, the difference between him and Matt Eberflus, who was just holding on to his job, if you are a bad season away from firing your coach, is it a good idea to let him pick the quarterback who you're hoping is going to be the future? I mean, they had a high first-round pick. You're hoping that you don't have one of those again. So that, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We'll see if he lasts this season. He might, if Jackson Dart has enough in him. Some of the mistakes he made, he held on to the ball too long. I think that was part of the reason that the Chargers were able to get 6 sacks in on him. He held into the ball. He didn't step up in the pocket in the right moments. He didn't seem to have the intuition as to where those edge players would be around him. And I think that made it hard for him to escape the pocket. Like I mentioned earlier, he was good at running once he escaped the pocket, but actually getting out of the pocket, he struggled. And I think that's something that can be fixed with time. You know, I think that's mostly just because of his lack of experience. He is an athletic quarterback, so I think that that'll improve, but it resulted in him taking a lot of unnecessary hits. And even when he was running the ball, you know, there was that play where he tries to stiff arm Cam Hart and he ends up just kind of slapping him on the helmet and then taking a huge hit. Because it's Cam Hart. Cam Hart's a physical guy. He knows how to tackle. I'm sorry, but that was a really dumb play. Instead of stiff arming, he needed to just lower his shoulder and go into that hit, or he needed to run out of bounds. Either way, maybe slide. Either way, there was no reason for him to take a hit like that, and I think that was a really dumb play, and you could see him react. He gets up right away. Then when they're not calling a play right away, he kind of leans over, and that's when the medical team forces him out of a game. And it's something Justin Herbert has talked about. He talked about on the Colin Cowherd show last week was, you know, when you take big hits, your team needs to know that you're okay. And so you can afford to take a while to get up, but once you're up, you have to be on. Because when you're back in that huddle, people are looking to you to lead, and they need to know that you're okay. And I think Jackson Dart will learn that in time. He might even learn it right away. If I were his coaches, I would be like, hey, you cannot take this many hits. Clearly, we don't trust Jameis Winston for this team, so we can't afford to have you go down. And the Chargers did a pretty good job taking advantage of it. They had some opportunities to give him some bigger hits, and I do wish they would have taken that, because anytime you have a quarterback who runs a lot, if you're not willing to hit him hard, he's just going to keep running. He needs to know that there's a risk associated with him running all the time. But it is what it is. I'm going to call Jackson Dart versus the secondary a wash. Neither played very well. The next matchup is the one that clearly went to the Giants. The Chargers offensive line versus the Giants defensive line. Yeah, the Giants clearly won that. Obviously, they had the advantage on that matchup, like I said, going into the game. But then once Joe Alt went down, it was just chaos. Obviously, Jamari Sawyer had a terrible game, as he often does. Once you take Joe Alt out of there, you're really going with a almost full second string offensive line. Because remember, going into this season, the people we looked at on the offensive line as the problems, I mean, they were Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson, primarily, right? And then once Slater goes down, you have Pipkins moving to the side. But the 3 players that they could kind of hang their hat on was Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, and Mekhi Becton. And we didn't have any of them for most of this game. And that's clearly a big problem. And while Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson didn't look as horrible and uncomfortable as all of the backups around them, there were definitely plays where I'm looking at Bradley Bozeman going like, are you trying to give him a personal escort to Justin Herbert? Like, how are we possibly so out of step with what is happening here? They were mostly able to hold Dexter Lawrence back, but obviously they did not hold back Brian Burns. They did not hold back Abdul Carter. He wasn't credited with any sacks, but he definitely was making an impact back there. Certainly in the run game, he looked like a top first-round pick, and that's what he was. Anyone who watched him at Penn State knew that he was going to come in and wreck games, so the fact that they didn't have a good plan for that was frustrating. They chipped on Trey Pipkin's side, and then not a whole lot Austin Deculus' side. Sorry, I forgot his name there for a second. I wish I didn't have to know his name. Okay, that sounds mean. But Kayvon Thibodeau was able to get a sack in as well. To me, I'm like, give Austin Deculus the help. If anyone can handle being one-on-one, surely of everyone on this offensive line, it's Trey Pipkins. So I'm not sure what was going on there. I'm going to have to watch the film to see, how Deculus did ultimately, but that was just brutal. And not only did Jamari Sawyer do a bad job in pass protection, but he also had a couple penalties and just seemed really uncomfortable and out of step. He looked really lost. I think he's the one who got the penalty on their first play of the first drive, which is just awful. Their first drive was terrible. The fact of the matter is this offensive line is too injured. We were concerned about them when they were all healthy, post Rashawn Slater. Now I'm looking around going, who can they possibly trade for? Who can they sign? Because the tough thing is teams don't want to trade away their offensive linemen. They'll trade away other premium positions. They'll trade away their edge. They'll trade backup quarterbacks. Teams will do just about anything at the deadline other than trading offensive linemen because it's just that hard to come by, which makes you think back to the draft and picking Trey Harris when they were good offensive line. Pretty much everyone that they picked could have been an offensive line pick that would have gotten decent value, except I would say Amarian Hampton. I think at that point he was pretty clearly the best player on the board, but that's something we're gonna have to think about going into next year's draft of, yeah, you need depth, but you also need more than just star tackles. You're gonna need a better interior. So we'll see what they end up doing with that. The next key matchup I want to talk about is the Chargers wide receivers against the Giants secondary. I'm also gonna call this a wash. Just like Jackson Dart and the Chargers secondary didn't play well, the Chargers wide receivers and the Giants secondary, first of all, it's hard to evaluate them because the Giants' defensive line completely blew up most plays. There wasn't any time to get to the third level. The Giants just had an excellent front. The good news for the Chargers is Quentin Johnston's absolutely cooking these defensive backs. I'm sure you guys saw that stutter step he had on the route that he ran that resulted in a touchdown. He looked fantastic, and that's sort of an X-receiver role, what he was doing, which isn't generally what we like to see him do, but he looked great, and he caught the ball, had the wherewithal and balance to get into the end zone, and then physically rolled right into a touchdown dance, which tells me that he's playing very confident, which you love to see. Keenan Allen, Amarian Hampton, Arondé Gadsden, they were all able to make plays. None of them were able to get down the field, really, but they were able to at least get involved, make an impact. Ladd McConkey had a few drops. I would like to see them get the ball in his hands more early in the game, and they did try. He had a drop on that third down play in the first drive, which was too bad, but I still think they need to keep going to him in these next few weeks, try to get his confidence up too. I think he's an important part of keeping Quentin Johnston open. I would prefer them to double cover Ladd than to double cover QJ just because of the year that he's having. And I think ultimately Ladd is going to have to be an important part of this offense. We will be really lucky if all of these receivers continue to be healthy throughout the year. Keenan Allen's older, and QJ, it feels like he's taken a beating most games, and he's been able to recover a bit, but I hope we don't see any of them on the injury report this week, but they're gonna need Ladd. They're gonna need his shiftiness. They're gonna need defenses to put their resources towards him. And even though he had some drops, I think they need to keep trusting him moving forward. So those are our takeaways from the key matchups. I know we aren't feeling good. I do want to highlight some positives because there were a few players who really popped off on this game. The first one who comes to mind for me is Tuli. Tuli Tuipulotu, to me, had the game of his life. He had 4 sacks, 6 tackles, 3 assisted tackles. He has been having a great year this whole time. He hasn't been able to turn it into sacks very much, but he has consistently gotten pressures, consistently great in the run game. He's not one of those speedy edge rushers who's really they're just there to pin their ears back and get after the passer. I would like the Chargers to sign someone like that for the purpose of putting them opposite of Tuli, especially for the future, because even though I know we're thinking about the timeline of getting Khalil Mack back, we have to think about after that as well. We have to think about next year, what's this position room look like? To me, this defense would be very complete with another edge rusher. He's had 23 pressures on the year, And we don't think a lot about pressures on the viewing of the game, like just on the broadcast, but quarterbacks will tell you that makes a huge difference. And he got a few big hits on Jackson Dart this game, and he had 3 sacks in the first half. I mean, this is a huge step up for him. If he can keep this up, I think that gives the Chargers more time to wait to get an edge rusher. I think then they can afford to kind of wait for the trade deadline, and hopefully they pick a young player that they can, look toward for the future. Beyond that, like I said, Quentin Johnston is cooking. He is, we talked about, maybe he can be wide receiver 2. You don't really want him in that X role, but maybe he can just be the guy who gets Lad open. You give him some short passes, let him get some yak, but I don't know. I think he's the wide receiver 1. So far, he has been wide receiver 1. Part of that is on a game like this, when all of the other receivers are struggling to do anything, how does he do? Gets a touchdown and he gets 98 yards. So to me, that's a really good sign. He's on track for a crazy amount of yards. I don't think he's actually going to get it, but he's on track for like 1,400 yards or something insane. He's going to have some down games, but the fact that it is a real possibility that he goes for 1,000 yards this year is pretty wild. He has about half as many touchdowns so far that he did all year last year. Things are really looking up for QJ. He's good enough to the point where I'm like, actually, was this actually a really good pick? Was this a really good use of a first-round pick? And obviously, his struggles in the last few years kind of negate that. But in terms of what he should look like at this point in his career as a first-round pick, I don't know. He's kind of doing it. He's kind of doing that. So I've always been pretty high on him. And even I am surprised at how well he has recovered from his issues. Keenan Allen mentioned a bit ago, I think it was on the Pat McAfee show, that QJ just looks so much more confident than his rookie season, which was the last time Keenan Allen played with him, which is such a good sign, and a really good sign about this coaching regime. And a good reminder that sometimes players really do develop. We always talk about player development, but it just feels like players are who they are. So that's really good to see. Finally, Omarion Hampton. He is the guy. He is the guy. He had 12 carries for 128 yards, not to mention 37 receiving yards. He has been everything we want him to be. I'm sure you all saw that play where he got the ball and just dragged those Giants players through contact for like 12, 15 yards, something like that. Justin Herbert goes behind him like he's going to push him forward, like, hey, maybe we can get another yard. And he kind of thinks better of it, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be putting myself in a position to get hurt. And it's a good thing because Omarion Hampton wasn't ready to go down. He kept going, forced a first down, just running with like rage. I don't know what it is, but he seems to be getting comfortable out there, which is great news because in a great running back draft, he is looking like he might be one of the best, if not the best, because even though, you hear about some of these other running backs, they have bad offensive lines, they're not being used right. And while I think Omarion Hampton could be used more often, the Chargers' offensive line is terrible right now. They are terrible. Omarion Hampton is still getting 128 yards in a game. That's crazy. And obviously him being useful in the receiving game is good. It means that he can sort of act as an extension of the run game, even when Herbert drops back, which I think is really important. He's gotten design touches there. He's been just kind of the check down option for Herbert. So I think he's finally taking that role of, we're not sure what to do with the ball, just dump it off to Hampton. He has also been great in pass protection. I think he saved some real missed blocks from Jamari Sawyer and Bradley Boseman. He's definitely given Herbert more time. He's always active. He never stops blocking until he sees that the ball is in someone's hands downfield, which is a really good sign. He's clearly, great kid, a really good attitude. He seems like more of a quieter guy, and it seems like now he's getting in rhythm, he's getting in step, looks comfortable out there. He had a great block on Herbert's one run. I wish Herbert had an opportunity to run more, but when your offensive line is really bad, it's hard to get out of the pocket. But Hampton was able to run in front of him and get a block that allowed Herbert to run for that first down on that third and 18 play. To be honest, I think he deserves more touches than he gets. He had 12 carries. I would like to see that closer to 20. I mean, he was the only player consistently going off, and even if they stopped him short a few times, I don't think that they're going to be able to do that every time, and I think that's an opportunity to wear out the defense, give your offensive line a break from having to drop back. More than anything, protect Herbert. I hope that they use him more going into next week against the Commanders. We'll get into that game in a future video, but To me, he ran well enough that it is a clear message to Greg Roman and this coaching staff. Give him the ball. And he's not the kind of guy who's going to beg for it. You know, he's not Malik Neighbors. He's not begging for touches, but he is playing well enough that I think they're going to give him the ball more next week. And another positive takeaway, which isn't about any player in particular, we're 3-1. Winning those 3 division games gives us a lot of room to figure out this offensive line. Even if they were to lose again next week, they're still with a winning record. Buys us some time before Joe Alt is back, before Khalil Mack is back. So to me, this is a pretty good spot to be in. I know it doesn't feel like that because the offensive line is in such a bad position, but you look at a team like the Broncos and you go, yeah, I'd rather be where the Chargers are. And while Jackson Dart looked okay, I do think his performance was kind of comparable to Bo Nix, where you miss some really important pass opportunities, you miss on some first downs. Obviously, Bo Nix missed on potential touchdown pass opportunities, and I don't think Jackson Dart missed on too many of those. I wish that the secondary had been able to get an interception. They haven't been getting enough turnovers this season, and that's been a little disappointing. We are going to go over where the AFC West stands as a whole. After the first quarter of the season, the Chargers are 3-1. That's a good spot to be in. They're still the leaders of the AFC West, but we will see where they stand heading into the Commanders game. But that's going to do it for me. My name is Cecilia. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of this. This has been the Chargers Check-In.